Ladies, let me tell you something that might shake the dust off your crown tonight. We live in a world that tells us to shrink to be chosen, to dim our lights so we don't shine too bright. But what if I told you the real shift happens when you stop chasing validation and start walking in revelation? See, men will treat you like a queen, but not when you beg, bend, or break for it. No, sis, they treat you like royalty when you start treating yourself like you're seated at the right hand of the king. Tonight, we're not talking about manipulation or playing games. We're talking about transformation, the kind that starts in your soul, shows up in your standards, and echoes through every room you walk into. You ready? Let's talk about the one thing that changes everything. You don't wake up one day magically knowing your worth. It's not something someone can hand you. It's not wrapped in compliments or confirmed by how many people like your photos or want your number. Your worth is born deep in the unseen places where God speaks when the world gets too loud and your soul is still enough to listen. The danger is that so many of us go out into the world with an empty cup, asking others to fill what only God can pour into. And that's where this cycle begins, of reaching for someone else's validation, hoping it will convince us we're worthy of love. But the truth is, no man can make you feel valuable if you haven't already decided you are. That's the trap. That's where so many daughters of God get stuck. You keep waiting for someone to choose you, but you haven't chosen you yet. You keep praying for a man who will see you like a queen, but you're walking around like a servant in your own life, serving insecurities, fears, and the broken narrative someone else handed you. And I'm not saying that to shame you. I say it because I've been there. I've been the woman who performed, who pleased, who pretended just to feel seen, but you can't fake royalty. You can't hustle your way into wholeness. See, knowing your worth isn't about arrogance. It's not about acting like you don't need anyone. It's about knowing that before anyone ever gave you a title, God gave you identity. That before any man ever called you babe, God called you beloved. When you know that, really know it, not just in your mind, but in your bones, you walk differently. You stop negotiating with people who aren't qualified to speak into your destiny. You stop shrinking so they'll stay. You stop over-explaining your value to people who don't even know how to value themselves. Because when you know your worth, you understand that love is not something you earn, it's something you deserve. And you don't have to trade pieces of yourself to keep someone close. You don't have to compromise your peace to be in proximity to a man. You don't have to turn down your light to make someone else comfortable. The moment you truly recognize your value, you start realizing how many situations you tolerated simply because you forgot who you were. That's why healing is so important. That's why time with God is non-negotiable. You can't know your worth apart from the one who created you. The world will try to define you by your mistakes, your appearance, your relationship status, but God sees you through the lens of purpose. And when you tap into that, it changes the game. You're no longer addicted. You're no longer looking to be chosen because you realize you are the choice. There's a certain power in a woman who knows her worth, not a loud power, not always visible, but you can feel it when she enters the room. It's the kind of energy that doesn't beg, doesn't chase, doesn't perform. She's rooted, she's grounded. She's not easily swayed by flattery or smooth talk. She's got discernment. She sees through intentions because she's in tune with her own. That kind of woman attracts a different caliber of man. Not because she's trying, but because she is. Men rise to the level of a woman's standards, not her desperation. And hear me, this isn't about being hard or having a wall up or playing hard to get. This is about being whole. And wholeness sets the tone. Wholeness communicates you may approach, but only if your presence adds peace, not chaos. Only if you're coming correct, not just coming close. Too many of us grew up believing that love is about sacrifice. And yes, love requires sacrifice, but not of yourself, not of your identity, not of your peace, not of your purpose. You were not created to be small just to be loved. You were created to be powerful, to stand tall, to move with grace and fire and softness all at once. That's what makes you divine. That's what makes you magnificent. And hear me when I say this. Knowing your worth doesn't mean you won't feel lonely sometimes. It doesn't mean you won't question or desire or wonder when it'll be your turn. It just means that even in the waiting, you won't settle. It means you've learned to sit with your solitude rather than entertain someone who isn't aligned with your spirit. It means you've grown past the need for temporary affection and are rooted in eternal truth. You are not here to convince anyone to love you. That's not your job. Your job is to love yourself so deeply, so fully that anyone who comes near either rises to meet you or removes themselves because they can't. That's what knowing your worth does. It filters your life without you having to say a word. And that's the kind of woman a man treats like a queen, not because she carries herself like one. Let me tell you something else. When you really know your worth, you're not impressed by potential. You're not swayed by empty promises. You're not available to be anyone's project, savior, or secret. You've done the work and now you require someone who's doing their own, because you understand that partnership isn't just about romance, it's about purpose. You're building something with your life. And anyone who wants access to your heart has to be aligned with that vision, not a distraction from it. And don't let loneliness trick you into believing you're less valuable. Don't let your relationship status make you question your significance. There is nothing missing from you. There is nothing broken about you. You're not waiting to become worthy. Right now, in your process, in your becoming, in your healing, God already stamped you with value. And no man can take away what God has already spoken. So if you're wondering why men aren't treating you like a queen, ask yourself, have I been treating myself like one? Have I been setting the tone for how others should honor me? Have I been making choices from a place of worth or a place of fear? Because the shift doesn't start with them. It starts with you. Always has, always will. There is a difference between standards and ultimatums, and the line between the two is often blurred by fear. See, when you don't know the strength of your own voice, you start using threats to keep what you should have walked away from. Ultimatums are rooted in clarity. One comes from a place of fear, the other from a place of identity. And baby girl, when you know who you are and what you deserve, you don't need to manipulate anybody into treating you right. You show them with how you move, how you speak, how you live. A standard isn't something you scream at somebody, it's something you embody. You don't have to constantly repeat your boundaries when you've already enforced them through action. A woman with standards is like a thermostat. She sets the temperature, and anyone who enters either adjusts or exits. That's the power of a standard. It doesn't beg to be respected. It commands it without a word. When you walk around issuing ultimatums like, if you don't do this, I'm gone, you're not standing in your strength. You're bargaining from your wounds. You're hoping that the fear of losing you will push someone to act right. But the truth is, if fear is the only thing keeping someone committed, then love was never the foundation. And you deserve more than that. You deserve someone who values you without being threatened. Someone who's drawn to your standard, not reacting to your ultimatum. See, setting a standard starts with getting real about what you want, not what you think you can get, not what you've settled for in the past, but what your healed heart desires. But here's the catch. You can't set a real standard from a broken place. Because when you're still healing, your standard might be a preference. You'll call it strength, but really it's fear. You'll say, I'll never let a man do me like that again, but it's coming from the residue of who hurt you last, not the revelation of who God is calling you to be now. And that's why standards take work. You don't just wake up with them, you build them, you shape them through prayer, through growth, through discernment. You stop looking around to see what everyone else is doing and you start looking within. You ask yourself the hard questions. What do I value? What aligns with my peace? What honors my purpose? Because a real standard isn't about controlling someone else's behavior. It's about protecting your environment. When you've got standards, you don't flinch when someone starts pulling away. You don't panic when someone can't meet you there. You don't lower yourself to make someone comfortable because you understand this truth. The right person won't be intimidated by your standard. They'll be inspired by it. And the wrong person, they'll either ghost you or gaslight you, and that's your confirmation. That's the gift. The sooner someone shows you they can't rise to your level, the less time you spend trying to drag them there. And I need to say this, standards are not just about what you want from a man. They're also about what you expect from yourself. You can't demand loyalty and show up inconsistent. You can't ask for honesty while telling little lies to protect your ego. You can't require effort when you've been operating on autopilot, because a real standard doesn't just filter other people, it matures you, it makes you grow, it keeps you accountable, it checks your character. That's why some of us struggle, because we're out here asking for kingdom love while still entertaining chaos. We're declaring, I want a God-fearing man, but we're still caught up with situationships that drain our spirit and confuse our soul. And I get it, the flesh wants what's familiar, the heart longs for connection. But you've got to ask yourself, is this connection costing me my standard? Is this attention worth the anxiety it brings? Is this man leading me closer to God or pulling me away from myself? When your standard is clear, your decisions become easier. You don't have to agonize over whether to stay or leave, whether to respond or ignore, whether to keep trying or release it, because your standard already answered the question. That's the gift of having a standard. It gives you peace in moments where your emotions try to create chaos. It anchors you, it holds you steady. It reminds you of who you are and what you refuse to tolerate. But standards only work when you enforce them. It's not enough to just say you won't accept certain behavior. You have to show it in how you respond. And that's the part that gets hard, because it means walking away from things that feel good but aren't good for you. It means having uncomfortable conversations. It means being okay with being alone rather than entertained. It means not flinching when someone tries to test your boundaries, because trust me, they will test them, not out of malice, but out of habit. People test what they don't believe. So if you don't believe in your standard, neither will they. That's why I want you to be rooted. I want you to be so clear, so confident, so anchored in who you are that you don't need to raise your voice to raise your standard. Your presence does the talking. Your peace does the screening. Your alignment does the choosing. Because when a woman of God sets a standard, heaven backs her up. The Spirit will start exposing what doesn't belong. Doors will close that you would have begged to stay open. People will walk away and you won't chase them, because you'll understand your value was never up for debate. And here's the truth. The man who is meant for you will see your standard and honor it, not just because of who you are, but because of who he is. Because kings recognize queens. Whole men aren't intimidated by powerful women. They don't compete with your strength, they complement it. They don't shrink your standard, they rise to it. But they can only do that if you keep the standard in place. Not just when it's easy, not just when it's convenient, but when your soul says, this is who I am and this is what I require, not because I'm trying to prove anything, but because I finally remember who God created me to be. So no, don't confuse an ultimatum for a standard. One is reactive, the other is proactive. One is fear drum and the other is faith-filled. One says, do what I say or I'm gone. The other says, this is what I require, and if you can't meet me there, I'll release you in love and keep walking in peace. And baby girl, that's power, that's authority, that's divine alignment. Because the most beautiful thing about a woman with standards is that she doesn't need to force anyone to stay. She just makes it clear that if they can't love her right, they can't stay at all. You cannot build a future on top of unhealed pain. You cannot call dysfunction preference just because it feels familiar. You cannot expect to receive love the way God designed it if you're still defining it through the lens of who broke you. Healing is not optional if you want healthy love. Healing is not some soft, pretty thing you post about. It's a war you fight with yourself to get back everything that trauma tried to take. And until you do that work, you will settle. Not because you don't want better, but because part of you still believes you don't deserve it. Let's tell the truth. So many of us are not in relationships. We're in survival mode with another person. We're calling it love, but it's really just a trauma bond. It's comfort wrapped in chaos. And when you're wounded, chaos can feel like chemistry. Pain can feel like passion, and control can feel like love. But none of those things are real, and you know it deep down. Your spirit knows when it's not safe, when it's not right, when it's not God. But unhealed wounds will talk louder than your wisdom if you're not careful. You have to heal because unhealed people attract what matches their brokenness, not their prayers. You can be praying for a good man, a kind man, a man who covers you spiritually, but if you haven't healed, you'll keep choosing the one who excites your dysfunction, not the one who honors your soul. You choose the man who makes you feel needed, not the one who empowers you to be whole. You'll pick someone who triggers your wounds because deep down, your inner child is trying to rewrite a story that only God can redeem. That's why healing isn't just about letting go of your past. It's about confronting the patterns you created to survive it, the walls you built, the masks you wear, the stories you tell yourself when you're scared of being alone. Because healing doesn't just change what you attract, it changes what you allow. It shifts your yes. It strengthens your no. It makes you pause when you would have pursued. It gives you the courage to walk away when your flesh is screaming to stay. And I know healing is hard. I know it's not glamorous. It's not always tears and worship music. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's grief. Sometimes it's sitting on your bed, phone in hand, wanting to text them, but choosing yourself instead. Sometimes it's losing people. Sometimes it's unlearning habits that once protected you but now keep you trapped. But healed women love differently. They don't project. They don't punish. They don't settle for men who remind them of their pain. A healed woman doesn't try to fix a man. She doesn't fall in love with potential because she's no longer looking to rescue anybody, especially not someone who's drowning her in the process. A healed woman doesn't stay in something broken just because she's afraid of starting over. She'd rather rebuild with peace than sleep next to chaos every night. A healed woman doesn't confuse being chosen with being cherished. She knows the difference. She's lived the pain of the counterfeit, and now she's hungry for the real. You have to heal because love requires vulnerability, and vulnerability without healing is dangerous. It makes you open to the wrong things. It makes you available to people who are only there to fill a void, not walk with you in purpose. And I don't want you attaching yourself to a man just because he's consistent in your loneliness. I want you to be whole enough that you don't need saving. You need partnership, someone who can pour into you because you're not leaking from old wounds. And listen, your trauma is not your fault, but your healing is your responsibility. You can't keep using what they did to you as a reason to keep choosing what's breaking you now. There's a difference between acknowledging the hurt and living in it. You've got to get tired of repeating the same cycles, tired of dressing dysfunction up in excuses, tired of calling yourself strong when really you're just numb. Healing doesn't make you weak. Healing gives your strength somewhere to live in peace. Because if you don't heal, you will settle. You'll settle for a love that looks like your wounds instead of one that reflects your worth. You'll settle for attention when you were created for affection. You'll settle for promises with no action, for presence with no protection. You'll stay in places God called you out of just because you're afraid of who you'll be without them. But sis, hear me. Whatever you lose in the healing, God will restore with glory. You are not walking away empty. You are walking away ready. And no, healing doesn't mean you won't still have triggers. It doesn't mean you won't get tempted to go back, but it means you'll have the tools to stop romanticizing what almost destroyed you. It means you'll stop asking God to bless the relationship that you know isn't bearing fruit. It means you'll be able to recognize red flags without trying to repaint them white. Healing sharpens your discernment. It gives you clarity where there used to be confusion. It anchors you. So many women say they want to be treated like a queen, but they still carrying the identity of rejection, still calling themselves broken when God already called them whole, still settling for crumbs when their table has already been prepared. But a man can't treat you like a queen if you're still showing up like a prisoner to your past. He can't love you right if you flinch every time he gets close, if you shut down every time he doesn't text back quick enough, if you interpret space as abandonment and love as possession. Healing is how you receive love with peace instead of fear. You can't just want love. You have to be ready for it. You have to be healed enough to not sabotage it when it comes. You have to be whole enough to not chase it when it leaves. Because sometimes it's not that the right man hasn't come. It's that the healed version of you hasn't met him yet. Sometimes God is holding it back, not to punish you, but to protect it. He knows what's inside of you. He knows the calling. He knows the weight of your anointing. And he's not going to let you give that away to just anyone who makes you feel less alone. So don't rush your healing. Don't numb it. Don't distract yourself from it. Sit in it, work through it, pray through it, go to therapy, read the books, go back to God, not just when you're hurting, but when you're whole. Let him remind you that your worth didn't disappear with your heartbreak, that you're not damaged goods, that your value doesn't decrease because of what someone else mishandled. Healing is how you make room for the love you say you want. It's how you rise out of survival mode and into divine alignment. It's how you stop settling from a place of pain and start choosing from a place of power. Because the moment you start healing is the moment you stop trying to convince someone to stay, and you start attracting someone who's already aligned to walk with you. There's a strength that comes with being a woman that doesn't have to roar to be heard. It's not loud, it's not forceful. It doesn't dominate the room with aggression. It changes the atmosphere with presence. That's feminine power. It's divine, it's rooted, it's calm in the storm and thunder when necessary. It's nurturing without being naive. It's soft without being silent, but too many of us have been living in survival mode so long. We've worn our trauma like armor and called it empowerment. We've moved through the world guarded, not because we're fearless, but because we're tired. And now we're calling that exhaustion confidence. But it's not confidence if it costs you your softness. It's not power if it's keeping you from receiving. There's a difference between surviving and thriving. Survival mode teaches you how to get through. Feminine power teaches you how to be. Survival says, I can't trust anyone. Feminine power says, I trust myself enough to discern who's safe. Survival says, I don't need a man. Feminine power says, I desire partnership, but I'm whole with or without it. One is reactive, the other is intentional. One is built from pain, the other from purpose. And until you learn how to operate in your feminine power, you will keep showing up to love like a soldier instead of a queen. Survival mode taught you to fight. Feminine power teaches you to flow. But that transition is hard when all you've ever known is war, when every relationship felt like a battlefield and every day was about proving you were enough, when you had to carry everything because there was no one to help, when your emotions were too much for someone else, so you learned to mute them. When your heart got broken and you decided soft is dangerous, that's what survival mode does. It trains you to believe that if you let your guard down, you'll lose. That if you receive, you'll be taken advantage of. That if you're vulnerable, you'll be abandoned. But that's not truth. That's trauma talking in a voice that sounds like wisdom. Feminine power is not about weakness. It's about wisdom. It's knowing when to speak and when to be still, when to lead and when to lean back, when to protect and when to allow yourself to be protected. It's a posture of confidence that doesn't need to dominate to feel secure, and it's something men are drawn to, not because you're playing a role, but because you're finally walking in alignment with your divine design. You were never meant to carry it all. You were never meant to be in control of everything. You were never meant to stay in fight or flight and call it normal. You were made to rest, to receive, to radiate, not just push and press and strive. And yes, I know life didn't always give you space to be soft. Sometimes you had to be the one to figure it out. Sometimes you were let down by the people who were supposed to protect you. Sometimes the people you trusted the most were the ones who made you feel the least safe. But here's the truth. What happened to you doesn't have to define how you show up now. You can choose something different. You can rewrite the pattern. You can decide that your femininity is not a liability, it's a gift, a holy, sacred gift. When you're in your feminine power, you don't chase, you don't beg, you don't convince, you don't manipulate, you attract, you align, you receive, you sit in the truth of who you are, and you let what is meant for you come. Not because you're passive, but because you've already done the inner work to know what belongs in your space. You don't need to fight for what's aligned, you just need to recognize it when it shows up. And when you're still in survival mode, you can't always tell the difference between chemistry and chaos, between pursuit and performance, between love and codependency. But when you're in your feminine power, you stop confusing effort with control and peace with boredom. You were not created to always be in your masculine energy, doing, fixing, solving, leading, controlling, calculating. That's not balance, that's burnout. That's what happens when you think your worth is tied to your productivity or your ability to be everything for everyone. And I'm not saying don't be strong. I'm saying stop using strength as your only strategy. There's strength in surrender. There's power in patience. There's confidence in waiting with faith instead of forcing with fear. When you're moving in feminine power, you allow the masculine to rise. A man doesn't have to fight you to lead. He doesn't have to struggle to provide space for your gifts, because your strength is not a threat to him, it's a complement. He knows you're not trying to be him, you're being you, fully, authentically, graciously. And that balance, that's kingdom partnership. It's purpose-filled connection. That's where love flows. Not from performance, but from peace. You don't have to prove anything when you're in your feminine power. You don't have to audition for a role you were born to walk in. You don't have to play games or pretend to be less than just to make a man feel more than. You can be powerful and gentle, bold and graceful, intelligent and nurturing. You can hold space without controlling it. You can be the storm and the calm, the fire and the oil, the lioness and the lamb. Because God designed you that way, not to survive, but to reign. But here's the key. Feminine power is intentional. It's not passive. It's not lazy. It's not waiting for someone to save you. It's active trust. It's faith in motion. It's knowing that you don't have to force love to find it, that you don't have to sacrifice your softness for stability, that the right man will not run from your depth, your emotion, or your energy. You'll be drawn to it. Not because you're trying to be what he wants, but because you're finally being who you are. And that kind of woman is unforgettable. You have to ask yourself, am I operating from my feminine power, or am I still moving from the survival patterns I picked up when I was hurting? Am I trusting God with my love life, or am I micromanaging every outcome because I don't believe I'm safe unless I'm in control? Am I allowing myself to receive, or am I addicted to performing because I'm scared I'm not enough without doing? God is not asking you to strive, He's asking you to receive. He's not asking you to prove, He's asking you to rest. To trust that you can be soft and strong, that you can be vulnerable without being weak, that you can lead with love, not fear, that your softness is your superpower, that your femininity is not something to be fixed, it's something to be honored. And when you operate in that space, love finds you different. Men respond to you differently. You attract someone who doesn't want to compete with you but cover you, someone who doesn't feel emasculated by your power but empowered by your presence. Feminine power is not about gender roles or submission in the way culture has twisted it. It's about spiritual posture. It's about knowing who you are and who you're not. It's about letting go of the need to perform and stepping into the power of simply being. That's where favor flows. That's where queens are crowned, not because they fought for the throne, but because they finally realized it was already theirs.